mankind. This revelation was finished with a man called Muhammad. He did not bring a new message, but he finished the message of God that started with Prophet Hyde, peace be upon him, throughout the human race. God Almighty kept on giving different laws and regulations as per society developed, but one thing remains the same throughout the history. There is only one God, worship Him alone, He is absolute and eternal. For us as a Muslim, this is what we believe in, that there is a deity who is absolute, who is eternal, who is all-powerful, all-knowing, conscious, and possesses a will, and He is the one who has chosen man amongst men called prophets, given them message, communicated with them, given them message to deliver it to mankind. This is the simple concept of Islam. I believe it's the most simplest concept that exists when it comes to the religious beliefs. Another thing I would say that proves the rightfulness of Islam itself is the Quran, which is the book of the Muslims. We believe it's a miracle, a linguistic miracle, and it's a miracle because it possesses knowledge that could not have been known in the 7th century. Are you with me so far? Okay, I think you have a question.
I'm with you until the point that you're saying it has to be conscious. It has to have a will.
You mean the deity?
I do not get this point. Because I think only because we can't imagine something to happen without a will or without a conscious decision. That does not have to mean that's not possible, because we are only humans, you know? We can't imagine everything. We can't even imagine, I don't know, what Einstein said or something. We can't even imagine that. Why should we be able to imagine deity or God or something? Why should we be able to imagine?
Let's put it this way. We have two options. Either it's a mechanical thing, or it's a conscious thing. When I say conscious, someone chose to bring that effect into place. So either it's mechanical or it's conscious. There is no third option. Yeah? My position is it's more rational to say that it's not mechanical. The reason being more rational than the opposite. The reason, the examples I've given is because look at the effect. The effect speaks for itself. What is the effect? You have the whole universe and you have very precise laws within the universe. Laws so precise that even if we change it by hair's breadth, we cease to exist. This fine-tuning of the universe.
But we only know of one universe.
Yes.
And by definition, we can.
Yeah, and that's why we can only discuss one universe, because there is no evidence of the other.
The maths tells us of a whole endless amount of other universes.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
In many worlds that you quoted yourself, it does.
It's an opinion he has given. It's not a mathematical thing.
But
I don't want to go
You
back.
quoted it yourself.
There is no empirical
You heard him
evidence.
say it, right? Look it up. Alexander Vilenkin.
I quoted the scientist for a specific theorem he has formulated for the beginning of the universe. The point I was making is
if
this.
he was wrong about many worlds and all
he
the
gave his opinion. He's entitled to his
then
opinion. There is no empirical
Well, if he
evidence
was wrong
for
about
that.
many worlds according to you, and that's a respectful opinion of yours,
No.
then
Many
he's
worlds
wrong about the beginning of space and time as well.
Is the title of the book. You know that, right?
Yes.
Yes. So,
But he was wrong about the beginning to exist in space
opinion
and time.
can be right or wrong. Facts cannot be. Right? So mathematical facts about the theorem cannot be.
Many worlds is mathematical.
It's not mathematical. It's an opinion he has given. A multiverse theory is an opinion. There's no empirical
His
evidence.
beginning of space and time is mathematical.
I'm just going to answer
and
that
so is
question
the many
here for the
worlds.
lady. So there are two options. Either it's mechanical or it's conscious. I say it's conscious because I say, looking at the effect, it makes absolute sense that any deity or any being that has brought such a huge effect into place, which is so precisely tuned with laws and regulations, it makes sense that it chose to bring the effect into place with all its power and glory. If that is not the case, what we are looking at is randomness, that randomly one thing brought an effect into place, and that effect turned out to be absolutely precise for life to exist within that effect, and that does not make any rational sense. It's almost like saying, like example I gave to this gentleman, that I get a waterproof bag, I put some oil in it, I put some sand in it, I put some animal skin in it, shake it very well for billions and billions of years, and you will have your iPhone, because it has all the elements of iPhone in that.
iPhones aren't made of animal skin. If you did it with silicon and gold, etc.,
I was including my cover. That's plastic, but actually that's not animal skin. I said animal skin because the previous cover I had was leather.
Sure.
So you can take animal skin out. I have no objections. You can take it out. point remains the same. You shake these
It will
elements.
happen.
Randomness does not bring order into place.
Do
Randomness
you
does
agree or
not.
disagree with that?
Randomness does not bring precise laws and regulations we live under in this universe into place.
I disagree with that.
We had this discussion
Do you
earlier.
disagree with that?
Yeah.
Can you give me
We
an
had this discussion, me and you, earlier on. I'm going to be quick. Look, I wrote the word at random. And I swear, my daughter's life, I didn't do it on purpose. He watched me do it. We was talking while I was doing that. Look, I wrote the word spy. There's all sorts of words in there, right? And if you think of atoms, like the hydrogen and helium, to create different molecules, think of them as of letters of the alphabet. You'll spell every single different type of possible molecule, including DNA, if you have enough planets and enough time.
No.
Yeah? So spy, there's other words in there as well. We don't have time to go through. I'm just quickly trying to see. You can see, I showed you spy, right? There are a couple of others. Can't see it right now. I've only got 2,000 letters. If I had 1 million, you'd have loads of different words in different languages at random.
That sounds valid to me.
No.
You're
the-
talking very much. And
No, the
You're
point
saying-
point I was making is no, it's my opinion. The point I was making is
Soy, dot,
Yeah. I believe you. You're saying that
I'm
there
not
are two
disagreeing.
options.
soggy.
One option is that that was created by a conscious will and a decision, and the other is it was mechanic. But why are there only these two options? Because
You can
this
give me
is
a
your
third
human
one.
way of thinking.
But-
Can it be both? Can it be both at the same
cannot
time?
be both at the same time because you cannot have something and the opposite at the same time.
you can't imagine.
You can't imagine this because you are a human
That
being
happens.
It'll be
that can't
self-contradictory.
imagine this.
That
I don't have
happens
to
in
imagine
quantum
it because it's
mechanics.
self-contradictory. It's like saying I exist and don't exist at the same time. It's self-contradictory, so I don't have to imagine it. It's a self-contradictory statement. It's like saying circle is a square. It doesn't exist. Do you understand? Circle is not a square, square is not a circle. Or a circle square. It's a contradictory term. It's like saying that can you build something you cannot.
Yes, because this contradiction is because you have different definitions of a circle and a square. So you can't say this is the same thing because you have different definitions for it.
I understand where you're coming
But
from. Yeah.
with God, you do not have any definition. So
No, we
there
do
is
have a
no
definition.
contradiction if you have no definition of thing, you know? The
I-
contradictions you're making come from
I see your point.
human definitions.
Yeah, I see your point. But as human beings, we can only use human language. I cannot use the language of, I don't know, language that God's language, for example.
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
So we can only discuss in human language. In
Right.
human language, we have certain restrictions, right? So the point I'm making is this: if you have an effect that comes sometime in history, okay, and or sometime I'm using time as a, let's say, constraint of language
Yes.
in this concept.
If you have
so
an
you
effect that has
you-
beginnings and ends to it,
yeah, I think that's a better way of putting it. Yeah.
right?
So
you're
if
disproving
you have
your
a-
own theory here.
allow me
Continue.
to finish the point first. So if you have an effect, that has a beginning, like we discussed for the universe, you have multiple choices. Either that effect came into existence itself, or you have something else that brought the effect into place. Okay, we have discussed that.
Yeah, but
now,
I don't agree with you.
But you've just proven
I thought
yourself wrong.
You agreed with that point that the universe, if it had an absolute beginning, you have to have something else that brought the universe into existence. I thought we agreed on that point.
Yeah.
The only point
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
disagreeing is that effect does not have to bring it consciously or through a will. It could be mechanical.
Yes.
Or you said
But
there
I-
could be multiple
no.
options. What could be
No.
other options,
Yes,
for example?
that is what I'm saying.
Okay.
I say that, of course, there has to be something that brought the material into space, into being. This is where
Into existence.
Into existence. Okay, that's where we agree. But
Hmm.
I don't agree that there has to be either one option or the other option that describe this God, this
You
thing.
can give me other options. I'm open to that. So
My option is that that does not have to be different options, that it can be all of it together. Because
So you're saying mechanical and willful together.
yes,
You understand that these are two opposites. So either you do it by will or mechanically.
no, I say
These
those
two
are
cannot
opposites.
exist together.
Because if you say things are opposites, that's because
Can you have married bachelors?
sorry?
Can you have married bachelors? Bachelor
A
is the
married
one who's
bachelor.
not. Bachelor is the one who is not married. So can you have married bachelors? Can you have married bachelors?
No.
No. So you cannot have
No,
something
because
that.
this is because our language, our human
That's what we
definition
have to discuss.
is a bachelor is somebody who's not married.
And married is the one who's
married
married. Yeah.
is getting married. Yes, those are definitions.
I'm
But if it
open
comes
to options. You
God,
can give me another option.
if it comes to God, then we do not have this kind of definitions. So we cannot say something is
But God
a
is not the
contradiction.
author of contradictions. You understand? So God, when we say God,
Did you call me?
say again?
Did you call me?
You called God.
Did I- with a small g maybe. But anyway, I'm not reading a Bible right now.
Which Bible?
So the point I'm making is, when we discuss as human beings, we have constraint of language. I totally agree with you. I take your point. I take that point fully on board, right? But that's all we have to discuss. But I think it's a wrong dichotomy to say that when we're discussing God, we should not be restrained by language, because language has come from God. But we believe every knowledge is from God. Language is part of knowledge. So what we are saying is this: when we discuss God, we have to understand that there is a certain concept that we adhere to, and we discussed that concept in detail past 2 hours. God cannot be something that is a self-contradictory statement. So for example, God is not something that does not exist, for example. Now I'm using human language, but I'm saying God is something that lives forever, everlasting. So if someone says, I believe in a God that died, then by definition it ceases to be God, because by its own very nature, God has to be something that is existent forever. Otherwise, you will have the same question we discuss about
I disagree.
Infinity,
Nothing
etc.
exists forever.
Because if they say that God's existence is beyond human understanding, well, then a God may well
No, we're not saying
die
that.
and
We're not
go
saying
to
that.
heaven. The Jesus story, it makes no sense to humans.
Let me then
but it
let me
wouldn't
then
make sense
let me
to
then
humans.
let me
How
then put
many
it this
people
way.
in
Can't
this
fathom
earth?
God.
Sorry, I can only speak to 2 people at a time. Sorry. So
I mean, I still think it's ridiculous, but that
no. Then let me put it this way. Okay. If we haven't, our mind can only process information that is already there. It can make different combinations of that information, but it cannot give you new information. For example, the only information that is already there, it can make different combinations. For example, if you have 5 things, you can combine 1 with 5. You can combine 1 with 3 and give you different combinations. Anything that you have not observed or seen before, okay, is not something mind can give you definition for. So, for example, if someone saw from Stone Age, if you get someone and make them see an aeroplane, they have not seen that thing before, so their mind wouldn't know what it is unless you inform them, right? You give them that knowledge. Similarly, about God, God has told us certain things about Himself, how His nature should be, but there are a lot of unknowns. I agree with this gentleman. The only way we would know about this unknown is when God tells us about it, because God is something we have not seen. So with the lack of information of our conscious mind, if we start predicting how God is like, then what we are doing is we are making an argument from ignorance. We can only go to an extent where God has told us to go to. So for example, in the Quran and Islamic traditions, there are certain verses in the Quran and sayings in the Prophet's traditions. We would understand the nature of God. We know God is not something that is bound by space and time. We know from this information given in the Quran that God is something that is all powerful, something that does not beget, and He is not begotten. He is nothing like something we can imagine. But if I go beyond that point, then you're right, imagining things. I am speaking from the point of ignorance, so I'm not going to go into that space. I'm restricted as a human being, and I totally agree with you. I'm restricted with my language in defining God. I'm restricted with the information I've been given to define God, and I totally agree with you. But whatever information I have, I can use that information to come to a certain conclusion. And I, as a human being, as a rational human being, this gentleman as a rational human being, you as a rational human being, we have been discussing this only on the basis of rationality, what our mind can bring us up to. And we have discussed that it's rational to say that deity is independent of time and space. It's all powerful, all knowing. It's something that I would say, no part of the creation, something that created. The only thing we disagreed was, and I would say that it entails there has to be one as well, with the example I have given. There has to be eventually one, has to be the eventual mover or shaker that started all the events. Otherwise you will have the same question, who created that mover and shaker, and chain never ends.
Excuse me, 5 minutes you talking, I didn't understand any of them. It's
That's
just,
fine, that's
you
fine.
don't measure anything.
That's
Just you
fine.
say God is
I
that,
like the
God
sound
that.
of my voice, let me finish.
God is that.
I love the sound of my voice, let me finish. So, the only disagreement
We
we
had
have
a
here
whole
is,
hour of building up to
would-
that. I
would
understand
that-
what you're saying.
would that deity of being bring that effect into place with a will, a conscious will, or would that be something that is mechanical? So it's not something in its power. If we say that, then we cannot say it's all powerful, because that means all powerful entails will have to have control over power. So control is something that comes with power. So for us to say that it's all powerful, we will have to understand there is something that can exercise will. At the same time, I would say it makes more rational sense looking at the effect it brought into place. I would leave the argument at that. Looking at the effect into place, we would understand that it makes more rational sense for us to say that you exercise its will and consciously brought the effect into place, rather than something mechanical that brought the effect into place.
But just because it's more likely,
Say again?
just because it's more likely, or what?
To humans.
Yeah. What? From rationality, I agree we have restrictions. I agree with you. From rationality point of view, from rationality perspective, we have these restrictions. I agree with you. I cannot say. Just 1 minute.
No.
I cannot say.
I'm quietly raising my hand.
I
I'm
acknowledge
not
your point.
interrupting.
I acknowledge your point that from rationality perspective, from logical perspective, you make absolute sense. We cannot prove beyond reasonable doubt that it cannot be the other. I'm saying it rationally makes more sense. But what makes my argument more corroborative and takes it beyond reasonable doubt is other evidence which I've discussed. For example, the Quran being a miracle, linguistic and otherwise, and the nature of the message of Islam itself, which is very simple, very straight, which I've explained. And there are other arguments I can make to show and corroborate those arguments based upon this, to show that beyond reasonable doubt that deity has to be one and has to be someone that brought willfully this effect into place. And I'm happy to discuss that, but I want to take that
Can
question.
I ask two things?
Yes.
One, what is your strongest evidence for the Quran that you just said there?
Linguistic miracle of the Quran.
We'll come to that in a second. So that explain that in a sec. And two, didn't we say? So I'm going back a little bit back towards near the beginning of our conversation. I think you was talking about if an existence has stuff where things start and end and they interact with one another, that would then mean.
Sorry, say that again.
Did you say earlier on? Did he say earlier on? That
Ask me, I will tell you if I
an
said it or not.
existence that has stuff that interacts, that has a beginning and an end. That existence would have to have a finite beginning to
Existence
exist.
of the final.
Is that what you understood when we was talking about that?
What I said was that there has to have a final
Yeah, no.
being that brought all the effects
There
into
has to
place.
be a. There has to be
Without the
a.
beginning.
That
Yes,
is
yes.
has to have the final cause.
That bit I
that
agree
brought
with, but my
everything
question
else.
was
Yeah.
to decide whether this thing has a final or finite beginning. How was you measuring that? Was you measuring that by things within that existence? If within that existence things have begins to end, then the whole thing
a
has
good
to have a
question.
Is that what you
It
was?
is cold, isn't it?
Yeah, I am literally shivering here. So, to measure whether the thing has a finite beginning to exist, was you saying that to measure it, to decide that, was based on whether within that existence things have beginnings themselves?
A good question. This is actually the
That's what I'm
argument
getting
of a philosopher from the eastern part
Because
of the
if-
world, Iqbal, and he writes in his book. It's called. I forgot the title, but anyway, he raised the same point. This is not what I was saying. What I'm saying is, from the rationality perspective, that the final cause that brought the effect into place, or where the chain stopped, has to be uncaused by definition. The reason why I say that is because if it's not uncaused, then your question would be what caused that cause, and that never
Sure.
stops. So for the effect to come into place, you have to have a final cause.
I'm not sure.
Final cause that is uncaused.
I'm not-
And this is where I left it.
I'm
So
not
if-
sure that answers my question though, because in order
Then
to
maybe I don't
decide,
understand your question.
in order to decide, right? So we have this thing, right? It exists,
Yeah.
and we're trying to decide and measure whether that thing ever began existing
Okay,
or whether
okay.
it's uncaused.
I think I've answered your question then.
So, was you saying that space and time has
Sorry, I'm
things?
getting cramps now because yeah, good.
Was you saying that space and time has like movement, and movement begins and the
No,
movement
I-
ends?
No one can say that. But what I'm saying is this: the cause itself, the cause itself has to be there has to be a cause that is uncaused. Otherwise, you will never have effect in place.
Okay,
That's all
sure.
I'm saying.
But what's
So
your
by
question?
definition, it has to be uncaused.
So-
So there is no measurement. It's a
I'm
rational
trying to-
definition.
What I'm trying to get at is that I thought what I took from what he said earlier on was yes, I agree with you. So I haven't really gotten anywhere. Is there has to be an uncaused cause?
By definition, yeah.
But- and I
That's all I
absolutely-
said. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, but going back to what you were saying, as humans, that's just what we expect.
Yeah.
Maybe nature, or it might not. It's, you know, it won't even be nature. It'll be something else.
Yeah.
Maybe though things can disappear and come back again. Maybe things can. It sounds absolutely nuts, but maybe it happens. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
Things can stop existing and then start existing again. But my point was, how are you deciding that space and time has to begin existing? What is it?
Well, we've
Is it
gone through
because we see
We've
other
gone-
things that
we've
move
gone
around?
through. We've gone through that when we discussed the beginning of the universe.
We may have
Absolutely.
gone through it, but that's why I'm asking you
Yeah.
again, because we've discussed so many things.
We've gone through it.
I
I'm
understand-
going to move on to the Quran now.
All right. So,
Right, so we've gone through the beginning of the universe. So that argument we've only gone through.
I think we're going
is
now.
freezing,
It's
isn't it?
getting-
Okay, no problem. Well, it was great talking to you. Thanks for your time. But my humble suggestion would be that if you want to understand more about Islam, read the Quran yourself. Right? You can find it from the
Is
book.
there a
Uh,
German
ex-
version?
German version there is, but I can give you an English translation.
Yes? Oh, that would be
One,
great.
there was a brother here. Where's he going?
Das ist einfach ein Modell auf die Straße gehen und ziehen soll.
My apologies. There was a brother with a
Das ist
English translation of the Quran. You have it? There was a brother here. Oh, he's gone. Okay. Maybe if you walk in that way, you will see a table. You have translated copies of the Quran. No, I have to warn you that translation Quran is in Arabic language. So translation is through the language of the translator. So there are differences in translations, but Arabic language Quran is exactly the same, preserved from the time of Muhammad, peace be upon him, until now. This is the first miracle of the Quran, is its preservation as a final revelation from God, because God has taken it upon him to preserve it. It's the work in the Quran. You have thousands, millions of people who have memorized it from cover to cover, only book in the world, and you can observe it in any mosque in the month of Ramadan. There you go, sister. So it's an English translation. It's a decent one actually. Go to any mosque, Ramadan is finishing in 2 days' time, towards the whole month, and they will be reciting Quran at night from their memory, and there will be people standing behind correcting them only from their memory. So even if we don't have the Quran in book form, we still would have the Quran from our memory, because this is the first preservation method of the Quran. Read it and decide for yourself. Okay? There is one more thing I want to show you for your quick reading. There is something given at the back. So any topic specifically you want to read about, for example, you have it in what you call it your alphabetical order. So for example, women, you can go into W, and all the verses about women will be mentioned. So you can go through those verses as well, for example. So it'll be the easiest way.
One last thing. Did you say that your God is the most rational one? The one that makes
The concept of God we follow is the most rational.
What is
Along with the
exactly
Jews follow the same concept.
the difference to the Christian God?
Okay. When we say God is one, we mean one means one.
Okay, yeah, the Trinity, right?
Yes. So basically we say Jesus, peace be upon him. We believe he is the Messiah. No Muslim is a Muslim who does not believe in that. We believe he was one of the mightiest messengers of God, but he was the messenger of God. He is not the son of God like Christians believe, or someone equivalent to God. We say we're standing in the middle. You have Jews on one side and Christians on the other. Jews took him as someone who was almost like a heretic, someone who blasphemed. Christians took him to another level, that he's a deity. We are in the middle, and we have the most decent ground that he's a prophet of God, like series of other prophets that came before him. and he delivered the same message of oneness of God, that God is one, worship him alone. And he's the one we revere and we love, but we do not say that he's the Son of God and he's the sacrifice. We believe that he taught the same concept of forgiveness, like Moses did, like Muhammad did, like Abraham did. That you have sincerity in your heart, you ask forgiveness directly from God, and God will forgive you. And this is your atonement of sin, not through believing that he will die for your sin, and not through believing that he is the deity equivalent to God. That's the major difference. There are some minute ones, but that's the major one. Yeah? Yeah. Thank you very much for your time.